What if the most terrifying truth in the Bible has been hiding in plain sight for thousands of years? What if the stories you've read about giants weren't fairy tales or exaggerations, but documented accounts of beings so powerful and so corrupted that God Himself had to intervene to stop them? Most people read Genesis without realizing they're standing at the edge of one of Scripture's deepest mysteries. A mystery that connects the ancient world to our present day and points directly to the end times. The Nephilim. Even the name sends chills through those who truly understand what it means. These weren't just tall men. They weren't simply warriors of unusual size. They were hybrids, offspring born from a union so forbidden, so unnatural, that it triggered the most catastrophic judgment in human history, the Great Flood. Have you ever wondered why God would destroy nearly all life on earth? Why entire civilizations had to be wiped out? Why the Israelites were commanded to show no mercy to certain nations? The answer lies buried in the story of the Nephilim. This isn't a story for the casual reader. This is for those who sense that something deeper is happening beneath the surface of Scripture. This is for the seekers who refuse to accept easy answers. This is for those who understand that we are living in days that mirror the ancient past. Days when boundaries are being crossed, when corruption runs deep, and when spiritual forces are positioning themselves for a final confrontation. If you've ever felt that the Bible contains layers of truth most people never discover, you're absolutely right. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain. Genesis 6. The forbidden union. Let's begin where the mystery starts. Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. The text is brief, but the implications are staggering. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Read those words again carefully. Sons of God came unto the daughters of men. Who were these sons of God? This phrase appears multiple times in the Old Testament, and in the book of Job, it clearly refers to angelic beings, divine entities who stand in the presence of God. Job 1 verse 6 says, Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. These were not human men. They were heavenly beings. But something went terribly wrong. Jude 1 verse 6 provides a crucial clue. And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, He hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. These angels abandoned their assigned positions in heaven. They left their proper dwelling place and descended to earth with forbidden intentions. They crossed a boundary that was never meant to be crossed. The result? The Nephilim, a word that in Hebrew means fallen ones, or those who cause others to fall. These beings were the product of an unholy union between the spiritual and physical realms. They weren't created by God's design. They were the result of cosmic rebellion, a corruption of the natural order so severe that it contaminated the entire human race. The Nephilim weren't just physically imposing. Scripture calls them mighty men and men of renown. They were famous, powerful, influential. They were the heroes and tyrants of the ancient world, beings whose strength and stature inspired both awe and terror. Could these be the origins of the demigods in ancient mythology? The Titans of Greece? The legendary heroes with divine blood flowing through their veins? It's not coincidence that every ancient culture has stories of giants with supernatural origins. The corruption in the FLO now, here's where the story gets even darker. Genesis 6 verse 5 tells us, "And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." This wasn't occasional sin. This was total moral collapse. Humanity had become thoroughly corrupted, not just in action, but in thought, imagination, and intent. Every impulse was toward evil, continually. Was this corruption natural, or was it accelerated by the presence of the Nephilim? The text suggests that their existence was directly connected to the wickedness that filled the earth. These hybrid beings represented a pollution of God's created order, a mixing of realms that was never intended. And their influence spread like a virus through human civilization. God's response was decisive and absolute. And the Lord said, "I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air. For it repenteth me that I have made them." The flood wasn't just a judgment on human sin. It was a purging of genetic and spiritual corruption that threatened to completely derail God's plan for redemption. If the human bloodline became fully contaminated, the promised seed, the Messiah who would come through the line of Adam, could not be born. Only Noah was found righteous. Genesis 6 verse 9 says Noah was perfect in his generations, a phrase that suggests not just moral integrity, but genetic purity. His family line had not been compromised by the Nephilim corruption, and so, through Noah and his family, humanity was preserved and given a fresh start. The floodwaters rose. Every living thing outside the ark perished. The Nephilim, those towering giants, drowned along with the rest of the corrupted world. The judgment was complete. The earth was cleansed. Or was it the post-flood problem? Giants return here is where the mystery deepens into something truly unsettling. Genesis 6 verse 4 contains a phrase that scholars have debated for centuries. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. After that? After what? After the flood. If the flood destroyed all life except what was in the ark, how could there still be giants afterward? Fast forward several hundred years. The Israelites, freed from Egypt and journeying toward the Promised Land, send 12 spies to scout out Canaan. What they report back is chilling. Numbers 13:33 records their words. "And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight." These spies weren't speaking metaphorically. They were terrified. They felt like insects compared to these massive beings. The Anakim were real, physical giants, and according to the text, they were descendants of the Nephilim. But how? Several theories have been proposed. Some scholars believe that the fallen angels repeated their rebellion after the flood, once again producing hybrid offspring. Others suggest that the Nephilim gene was somehow carried through one of Noah's sons, possibly through the line of Ham, whose descendants included the Canaanites. Still others point to the possibility that the term Nephilim refers not just to a specific pre-flood race, but to any human-angel hybrid, meaning new giants could emerge whenever fallen angels crossed boundaries again. Whatever the mechanism, the result was clear. Giants once again walked the earth, and they were concentrated in the very land God had promised to Abraham's descendants. The giants of Canaan, enemies of the promise to the promised land, wasn't just occupied by ordinary nations. It was infested with giant clans: the Anakim, the Rephaim, the Emim, the Zamzummim. Deuteronomy 2 verses 10 to 11 describes the Emim, a people great and many and tall as the Anakims, which also were accounted giants as the Anakims. These weren't isolated individuals. They were entire tribes, powerful and organized, dwelling in fortified cities throughout Canaan. Why were they there? Was it coincidence that the land God promised to his people was occupied by descendants of the Nephilim? Or was this a strategic placement, a last-ditch effort by spiritual forces to block the fulfillment of God's covenant? If Israel could be prevented from taking the land, if they could be intimidated into turning back, then God's promises would fail. And if God's promises failed, his entire redemptive plan would unravel. This is why God's commands to Israel seem so harsh to modern readers. When God told them to utterly destroy certain nations, men, women, and children, it wasn't arbitrary cruelty. It was surgical removal of a spiritual cancer. These weren't just pagan tribes. They were genetically and spiritually corrupted populations whose very existence threatened the purity of Israel and the coming of the Messiah. Joshua 11:21-22 records the systematic destruction of the Anakim. And at that time came Joshua and cut off the Anakims from the mountains, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, and from all the mountains of Judah, and from all the mountains of Israel. Joshua destroyed them utterly with their cities. There was none of the Anakims left in the land of the children of Israel. This wasn't genocide. This was spiritual warfare manifesting in physical battle. Og of Bashan, the last giant king among all the giant clans. One figure stands out as particularly significant: Og, king of Bashan. Deuteronomy 3 verse 11 provides a striking detail. For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbath of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it, after the cubit of a man. 9 cubits by 4 cubits. That's roughly 13 to 14 feet long and 6 feet wide. Imagine a man requiring a bed that size. Og wasn't just unusually tall. He was a living relic of an ancient race, the last of the Rephaim who had once dominated the region. His kingdom, Bashan, was known for its fortified cities and military strength. But when Moses and the Israelites approached, God gave them victory. Deuteronomy 3 verse 3 says, So the Lord our God delivered into our hands Og also, the king of Bashan, and all his people. And we smote him until none was left to him remaining. The defeat of Og was more than a military conquest. It was a symbolic victory, proof that no matter how ancient, how powerful, or how physically imposing the enemy, God's promises cannot be stopped. Og's fall marked the beginning of the end for the giant clans. But their story wasn't quite over yet. David and Goliath, the giant that defined centuries later. Another giant would step onto the stage of biblical history, and his confrontation with a shepherd boy would become one of the most famous stories ever told. 1 Samuel 17 verse 4 introduces us to Goliath of Gath. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. That's approximately 9 to 10 feet tall. For 40 days, Goliath taunted the armies of Israel, challenging them to send a champion to face him in single combat. Every soldier in Saul's army was paralyzed with fear. Every soldier except one. David, the youngest son of Jesse, a boy who tended sheep, heard Goliath's mockery and asked, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God?" David's confidence didn't come from physical strength or military training. It came from faith. He declared to Goliath in 1 Samuel 17 verses 45 to 46, "Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand." With one stone from his sling, David struck Goliath in the forehead, and the giant fell. David then took Goliath's own sword and cut off his head. The Philistine army fled in terror. A boy defeated a giant not through superior strength, but through faith in a superior God. But here's what many miss: Goliath had brothers. 2 Samuel 21 verses 15 to 22 records that David's mighty men later fought and killed 4 more giants, all relatives of Goliath, all from Gath. One of them had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 digits total. This bizarre physical trait suggests genetic abnormality, possibly a remnant marker of the Nephilim bloodline. The giant clans were being systematically eliminated. God's people were driving them out, but their legend would endure, and their influence would echo through history in ways we're only beginning to understand. Giants across cultures. A global memoir with a story of giants isn't unique to the Bible. Nearly every ancient culture on earth has legends of enormous beings with supernatural origins. The Greeks told of the Titans, primordial giants who waged war against the gods of Olympus. The Norse spoke of the Jotnar, frost giants who threatened cosmic order. Hindu texts described the Daityas, giant demonic beings. Even Native American tribes across North and South America preserved oral traditions about races of giants who once inhabited the land. The Paiute people of Nevada tell stories of red-haired giants called the Cete who lived in caves and terrorized their ancestors. The Choctaw Nation speaks of the Nahalo, a race of pale giants. From the forests of the Pacific Northwest to the mountains of the Andes, indigenous legends consistently describe encounters with beings of extraordinary size and strength. How do we explain this global phenomenon? Are these simply myths, archetypal stories that emerge independently in human psychology? Or could they be fragmented memories of a shared ancient reality? If the Nephilim truly existed and spread across the earth before the flood, wouldn't we expect to find their story preserved in the folklore of distant cultures, each remembering them through their own cultural lens? The parallels are too numerous and too specific to dismiss as coincidence. Giants with divine or supernatural parentage. Giants as enemies of the gods or of humanity. Giants associated with chaos, corruption, and judgment. The pattern repeats across continents and millennia. Archaeological whispers. Megaliths and emliths, then there are the structures. Massive stone monuments that the ancient world built with precision that seems impossible for primitive civilizations. Stonehenge in England. The pyramids of Egypt. The temple complex at Baalbek in Lebanon, where 3 foundation stones each weigh over 800 tons. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dated to 10,000 BC, featuring precisely carved megalithic pillars that predate agriculture and organized civilization. How were these monuments built? Modern engineers struggle to explain how ancient peoples could have quarried, transported, and positioned stones of such enormous weight without advanced machinery. Some have speculated that the builders possessed knowledge or capabilities far beyond what we attribute to early humans. Could the Nephilim, with their superior size and possibly advanced knowledge, have been involved in constructing these ancient wonders? Stories persist of giant skeletons discovered in burial mounds and ancient caves. Reports from the 1800s and early 1900s describing bones of individuals 10, 12, even 15 feet tall. While many such claims have been debunked as hoaxes or misidentifications, the sheer volume of reports raises